and women in this country.
Nancy Pelosi really owes any small business owner an apology for what she has done. And when you study this, and this is why we're so fortunate to have President Trump, and he understands business. I created my first small business when I was 20 years old, right? And there's 3 lessons I learned. I was the first to work, I was the last to leave, and I was the last to be paid. But almost every decision I made was in my kitchen table, the struggles that you do month to month. And what's happened here is small businesses, we asked them to make a sacrifice for the health of the rest of the country. If they had to shut down their business or just go to takeout, and they're really being hurt by that. But small business employs the majority of everybody in America. And so the challenge here, how can we help them? President Trump, working with the Senate Republicans and the House Republicans, we really came up with a really good idea. It will take 2.5% of your expenses. We'll provide you going through your local bank so you don't have to wait. And when you look at what this program had done, in 14 days, we had processed as many loans as a small business had done in 14 years. That's how successful we were. We saved 30 million jobs. But because it was becoming so successful that we supply you this money, if you use 75% paying your employees, even if they weren't working, paid your rent and paid your utilities, that was a grant. That was all free. So it kept you afloat for that liquidity you needed for those 2 months. Hopefully, then we're opening back up. Well, on April 7th, we said we're going to need more money for this. So the administration asked the House and the Senate if they would just add more money. Don't change the program, add more money. And Nancy Pelosi celebrated by saying no. She went on late night TV, showed that gourmet ice cream. I've never had that. I imagine it's very good. It's very expensive. But what happened was that small business, there was 700,000 more applications in, and they said, we're sorry, we can't process it. There's no more money. And Nancy Pelosi was laughing, and then she held it up for another week. And the interesting part is each week we get our unemployment numbers. There was 4.4 million that week. Nancy owes them all an apology because open back up today. Luckily, it's in a great need and a great desire. Their successes. I have a small business in my community. It's a private ambulance company. The owner calls me, and her husband had died a few years ago, and she was almost in tears. She said, we have never laid anybody off, but I was on the verge of laying people off until this loan came through. And she said, you don't understand. I could not imagine getting a 911 call and not delivering the service we've always promised people. But that's what's happening while Nancy's laughing. This is a serious matter. And I just had another business. It was just in the LA Times. They've been around since the 1930s. They're shutting down permanently now because they didn't know whether they'd get this loan.
Wow.
And it's damaging. She's hurting life. She's out of touch with the rest of the country.
Well, it's very clear if anybody watched that late night clip of her, exactly where she stands on things. My parents are also small business owners, Kevin, so they appreciate this just like all the other small business owners in the rest of the country. I want to get your thoughts on something. Here is a clip of Speaker Pelosi falsely claiming she supports the Paycheck Protection Program. Listen to this.
Again, we don't have any disagreement about wanting to help small businesses. They would like to say that, but they know that isn't true because we helped shape this program to begin with and are big believers.
I don't know how she says that with a straight face. For all your viewers, I want you to understand what happens in Washington. We have passed 4 different bills to help in this crisis. On the very first one, it was called a supplemental. This was funding for the NIH and CDC, preparing when it was coming, this virus coming at us. We wanted to put a small provision in there that protected 3M, that they could actually sell the public masks and sell the medical community masks that only goes to industrial. The Democrats blocked that. So those were millions of masks we couldn't get to people right away. On the second one, we were able to get it through, but she held it up again. On the third one, she comes in on a Sunday night where Chuck Schumer says everything's perfect, it's bipartisan, and she holds it up for the next week because she wanted to change election law, put in the Green New Deal. She was worried about funding for Planned Parenthood, nothing to deal with coronavirus. And then on April 7th, when we requested more money, because we were afraid we'd run out for the small business program because it's so successful, and 2 weeks later, we were correct, it ran out. And how that works is, Leader McConnell went to the Senate. We could pass something with Congress not even there by unanimous consent. He brought one page, just give more money like the administration wants. The Democrats actually sent Democrats to the chambers to stand up and say, they objected. Then when the money ran out, they did the exact same thing again. Nancy has held it up for another week, and this is where I don't believe the media is fair. They should call balls and strikes. She has held up every single provision we have gone through, and every time she's held it up, it's for some personal philosophical view. And it's not just her. Think about this. Her number 3 member, the majority whip, Clyburn, when the coronavirus first started coming and showing, he told his entire conference, this is an opportunity for us to restructure government in our view. Congresswoman Jayapal, she tweeted when Nancy Pelosi finally relented and let us move forward the small business money, and she said, that was a mistake. We should hold our leverage to get more of what we want. And then if you watch the Congresswoman AOC, when the oil price dropped to no one in the world seeing before, she said she loved that, because thousands of Americans were going to lose their job. So it's not just the Speaker Pelosi itself. It's almost the entire wing of Democrats. That's why, really, for this country to rebuild and be successful, we need your father-in-law, President Trump, reelected. He proved he could make the strongest economy in the world, but he needs a team in Congress that will work with him, not just focusing their time on investigation, impeachment, and ice cream. Let's focus and put people before politics.
You would think that that would be an obvious thing, but obviously the Democrats have missed the memo on that. You bring up a good point, though. We do need President Trump, Kevin, for 4 more years. In fact, the president's pro-growth policies actually stand in stark contrast with Joe Biden's economic plan. Biden's radical ideas would increase taxes on the middle class, not to mention his coronavirus relief plan included funding for the $1 trillion Green New Deal, which he just talked about. So why would Joe Biden's economic plan for the United States absolutely destroy the middle class?
It would make our country less strong. I mean, think about for a moment what he wants to do. He wants to raise taxes. Everything even Democrats complain about Bernie Sanders, he has agreed with. I mean, he said he'd raise your taxes. He said he'd support the Green New Deal. He's in part for universal health care. All the challenges we have today, we would fail at. And when you think for a moment, the 2 questions that's really going to be in the voters' mind come November, where is China? And where are we at who's the best to rebuild the economy? And think for one moment. If you look at both the 2 men who are running for president's lives, you look at what President Trump has accomplished before he was president, but he was talking about what China was doing, not just to America, but to the world. He was warning us even before he was a candidate. Then when he was a candidate, then as a president, he started making those changes. Remember, when President Trump made that decision January 31st, not to allow those planes from China to come into America, it took Biden 2 more months before he agreed to that. Nancy Pelosi criticized him. Joe Biden criticized him. Almost a month later, February 24th, Nancy Pelosi was inviting everybody to come down together into Chinatown in San Francisco. At the same time, President Trump, on January 31st, said stop those flights, the Democrats moved a bill on the floor. They stopped it right before it came, a no ban, to weaken his ability to do that to protect Americans. Yeah. So who's best to protect you? We can never put ourselves in this place again to allow China supply chains. Remember why we are hunkered down where we are today. It's because of a virus we did not invite, we did not welcome, coming from a distant land that lied to us. President Trump requested that our scientists, our doctors go into China, and we could have contained it right there in China, just like we did Ebola and everything else. But President Xi lied to the world. And the same time that President Trump was stopping those flights, the WHO, the World Health Organization, but I think the leadership acts like the Wuhan Health Organization, told us that it did not contact person to person. I mean, the president went against what the World Health Organization was actually telling him at the time. Thank God that he did that. So we need somebody that can be strong against China. President Trump had proved that. Joe Biden has been in their back pocket, not just Joe, his son as well. And then think about an economy. You can measure that economy compared to Obama's, to President Trump's, the strongest economy we ever had in American history. And it didn't reach one element, it reached everybody. It didn't matter if you were African American, Hispanic, white, Asian. Unemployment was the greatest. And we'll get back to that because the economy didn't take us here. A virus did. Southampton did a study. Had President Xi not lied to the world, 95% of this never would have happened. So what is the best leadership to give us strength against China? It's clear beyond a doubt, President Trump. And what is the best to rebuild an economy? That is even easier, that it is President Trump that'll take us right back to a strong economy. That's why we need to work together, because we know the media is against him. We know Nancy Pelosi is going to do everything in her power, as she watched with every single bill, to hold it up, which harms the economy, makes it more difficult. But I've watched this president never stop working. He's in Washington working where Congress is not. We're essential. I sent Nancy Pelosi a letter last week. Let's get back to work.